Hello and welcome back. This is Tommy Ellis, the Installation and Training Manager for Fibo North America. This is our next installation in our series of United States videos for how to install Fibo properly with various scenarios, conditions, etc. This one today we're going to talk about wall prep, and this one actually is kind of the precursor to our main installation video, because as you've probably noticed in a lot of our videos, we talk about, oh, you have to straighten the walls, you should have done this, you should have done that, we'll use OSB strips, etc. We're going to go into a little bit more detail today about exactly what's involved in doing that. The methods I'm going to show you today, these are the ways I approach straightening out the walls. And as you know, when you get into a situation, no wall is ever straight, no corner is ever square, no walls plumb, etc. Right? So we have to straighten our walls within about 1/8 of an inch reasonably to be able to install Fibo properly. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things today. So we're going to talk about using drywall or full sheet OSB or plywood, and we're going to show that on this wall. On the back wall here, I'm going to go over the OSB strip method. And on this wall over here, what we're going to do is we're going to simulate a scenario where somebody's cut out like a fiberglass shell, or they pulled out some old tile or whatever, and they didn't do a full demo, and we have to bring our Fibo in to match the substrate that's on the wall already and make sure that we've got a nice consistent plane, as well as we have to make sure the walls are straight, because I guarantee you the walls weren't straight when they put the drywall up and the shell in the first place. We're going to have to correct that, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. The last thing we're going to talk about in this video is blocking for ADA accessories. I've got some blocks in the wall here already for a grab bar on this wall here, and we'll show you a close-up of that in a minute. I put some additional studs for hanging a grab bar, as well as if I want to put a hinge shower door on the wall. And then the last one down here, which you can't see, we'll give you a close-up of that as well, is some blocking that we put in place for a fold-up shower seat. Okay, so for the first wall, this wall's got a couple of weird outages. It's kind of got a twist to it, and it's got about a 3/8 inch outage in the corner. What you can see is I've already put some shims up on the wall. I've stapled these in place because what I'm going to do is this is going to be my drywall wall, or everything that we've done here is going to apply if you're using full sheet OSB or full sheet plywood. A couple things about the difference between using OSB and plywood. If you're going to hang any accessory that's going to bear weight, like a shower seat, a grab bar, whatever, and you want to be able to place it anywhere in the wall, and you want to full sheet the wall, we recommend using a minimum of a 1/2 inch plywood instead of using an OSB sheet. And the reason for that is the plywood's a little bit stronger. As you probably know, working with OSB, sometimes you go and drive a screw and it won't go in, and then 2 inches over, the screw just flies right through the material. So we want something a little more robust behind anything that we're going to be putting on the wall that's going to bear some weight. So if I was just to put a sheet of material on a wall that's not straight, I've still got a wall that's not straight, right? So if I come over here after I put my shims in, I did a lot of surveying before I did this and figured out what my outages were, and made some shim packs to make that nice and straight. So if you come back here now, if we go all the way down to the bottom, I'm perfectly plumb all the way down, and I've done the same on all of my studs. Go ahead and cut. On this wall here, we're going to use our OSB strips, and for most basic Fibo installation, OSB strips is the fastest, easiest, and best way to get your walls nice and straight without having to do a lot of the pre-work I did on this back wall by stapling in shims and whatnot. With the OSB strips, we can actually work our way up from 0 to our outage relatively quickly. So that's what I'm going to do on this back wall here. One of the things I want to note is in this particular video, I'm going to be using a heavier, thicker OSB strip. If you look down at the bottom, this particular shower pan has a heavier flange than most do. So I need to have the thickness of material be enough to come out and cover that flange. So I'm going to be using 5/8 OSB, but typically in most situations, 7/16 OSB is going to work fine for you. And again, this wall here, this is the wall that I had a fiberglass unit in. We cut it out. They left the drywall. This is a remodel situation that you're going to run into a lot, especially if you're doing multifamily renovations. Now, personally, if it were up to me, I would just take the drywall out all the way up to the ceiling and install the panels after I straighten the walls using the OSB strip method. But this particular customer, they don't want to do all that demo, and we have to find a way to make all of this fit. So what I did again here is I used a bunch of shims. I figured out what my outages were, etc. Started in this one, actually, this one's out at the bottom. So I had to, this wall is leaning this way. So I had to bring everything out in order to make everything nice and straight. So I've got a heavier bundle of shims on the bottom and tapered my way up until I got to 0. Now I can take a single piece of material or strips, I'm actually backfill this wall and be able to install Fibo on a nice flat plane. In the case of a backfill situation, you need to be mindful that you come out to meet the plane of whatever material is adjacent to it. For example, if you have 5/8 inch drywall, you can't backfill with 1/2 inch material. Conversely, you cannot backfill with material that will be proud of what is already on the wall. Now that we talked about the ways that we prep the walls to make them straight, now we're going to address the blocking that we were talking about, because I'm going to put a fold-up seat here. I'm going to put a grab bar on the back wall. I'm also going to put a grab bar on the front wall. But whether it's a grab bar, a hinge shower door, whatever, we need to have the adequate support for that. So down here, code says 1 2x12 or 2 2x6s in this particular space, which is what I've done here. And I've blocked it between the studs. And that's basically just cutting your 2x6 to size, screwing it into the studs, giving a solid backing so that when we drive those screws into there, any weight that we put on this device is going to be sufficient to hold the weight. The seat that I grabbed is rated for 250 pounds. There's some that go up to 400. Always want to make sure you check with the manufacturer's recommendations and specifications as it comes to blocking, etc., when you're preparing for fold-up seats and grab bars. Right here I've got my blocking set because I'm going to run a horizontal grab bar on this wall. And again, always refer to your local building codes and the uniform building code for what the proper height placement is of these particular devices. Make sure you check your building codes and what the recommendation of your device is when you set your placement. And the last thing I did over on this wall here is I ran a couple of extra studs into the field so that where either my glass door or my grab bar are going to land, I've got plenty of backing material for that. If you look here into this corner, you can see actually I added another stud here as well. The reason for that is because I had to build off this wall so much that I didn't really have anything to be able to bite into in the corner when it comes time to install the Fibo. So another thing you want to think about when you're doing prep is, do I have 2 pieces to be able to secure screws into each corner, depending on the direction of the internal corner profile where the screws need to go. That needs to be a nice solid square of material back there. So I added a stud here. I did the same thing on the other side, and I even came inside my end run and I added a stud on this wall just to make sure where the end of the panel lands, I've got solid material to drive a screw, particularly because this is going to have drywall on it. I want to make sure the screw is going to bite into something that's got some strength to it. Another thing I want to show you real quick is, because of the way I did this, and I did this using shims, you can use anything you want to straighten the walls out, because these walls are all out in a continuous direction. Using the wedge shims is what worked out best for me. So basically what I did is I found my biggest outage, I filled that, brought it to plumb up top, and worked my way through to give myself some solid place to drive screws when I attach my sheeting material. So what I did is I put a couple of marks on this wall here so that I know when I'm driving screws. I made sure that when my material was laying flat up against this when I dry fit it, that it was solid. It wasn't going to try and overdrive and give me some wavy action going on with the sheet of material. So I know where to drive the screws. Everything will be perfectly flat, and I'm not going to have a bunch of wavy business going on. So this is my backfill wall. As you can see, I've got a full sheet of OSB in place. I've got my blocking behind this as well for my vertical grab bar that I'm going to do and for my hinge shower. You can use a full sheet or you can use OSB strips. Either one is going to work fine, and the same principle is going to apply. What we'll do if we're using OSB strips, is basically start from the lowest spot and then bring that up until we meet the drywall or whatever the material is, and make sure we're flush. That's the most important part. This plane right here is nice and flush. And if you come over and take a look, my wall is now nice and straight. Okay, in this particular remodeling scenario, and you're probably going to run across this a lot, is when you go to straighten the walls, you're going to find out that all of a sudden we have a plane discrepancy outside of the Fibo shower. And a lot of times there's really not a whole lot you can do about that. Typically what's going to happen is we're going to install the panels, we'll install the trim, and then the tapers or the painters or whomever, somebody's going to have to come back in and either add another thin layer of drywall or float this thing out into the rest of the bathroom space to try and conceal this gap. Other times what I've seen happen is when guys cut these things out, they'll leave not enough drywall so that the Fibo has a gap between where the panel ends and the next thing of drywall starts. And that's another situation where somebody else is going to have to come back, backfill that with joint compound, hot mud, fix all, whatever, bring that all nice and flush, and then they can finish with the painting of the bathroom, whatever. But we're going to stop our material where the panels are going to stop. If we've got enough room to maybe run it a little bit longer, we can do that. But typically we want to stop it right at the end of our run. We've got the backfill wall done. Now we're going to do our full sheet wall. Like I said, in this instance, we're just going to do full sheet drywall, and it's actually going to be 2 half sheets. I'm going to do a 4-foot piece and another 4-foot piece. But the same principle is going to apply as far as how we straighten the wall. And as you can see, again, what I did is I started with my biggest outage and I worked my way down, and right about here is about where everything starts to flatten out. So I'm using 5/8 drywall again because I've got a heavier flange that I need to cover. And I also put a couple of marks outside of the Fibo area just to remind me where my blocks are, so when I set my seat in place, I know exactly where that's supposed to go. I've got it all written down, but at least I have these marks as a visual reminder of where that needs to go. And we're gonna get into that part of the tail end of this video. So now we'll go ahead and we'll get the drywall up on this wall. We'll talk about that a little bit. Then we'll move on to the back wall with the OSB strips. Now the drywall side is done, and as you can see, I've got everything screwed in on my studs, and my wall is now perfectly plumb. And that's the goal, is we want these walls to be nice and flat and straight. What's going to happen if these walls are not straight, you're going to have a hard time clicking panels together, and you're also going to get a twist in the corner. And that's going to be problematic when you're trying to fit everything together. So we need to have plumb walls, square corners, and everything nice and flat. One thing about the drywall is they've got the 2 tapered ends when you put them 2 pieces together, which is how they typically install that. So in this particular area, I'm going to want to be aware of that when I'm putting my panels up, because I don't want to drive any screws into this space, because it's going to drive the screws a little bit deeper, and then I'm going to have a little bit of a wave in my panel. I'm going to have a hard time clicking 2 panels together. So make sure you remember where this space is and don't drive screws into that spot. And likewise, if you're gluing, you want to add extra glue where this particular spot is, so that when you push it in, again, it doesn't suck itself in too far. And then the last thing I did is at the bottom is I put a couple of marks on the drywall to show where the studs are, so that when I screw in my base profile, I know that I'm going to be screwing through the drywall into a stud behind it, and make sure that base profile is nice and secure. Again, we're going to do the same thing as if this were a full sheet of plywood or a full sheet of OSB. Why might I use a sheet of plywood? As I mentioned before, maybe the customer, they don't need ADA accessories today, but they might want to be able to grow into it, and they want to put them wherever they want. So in that case, we'd go over this wall with a full sheet of a minimum 1/2-inch plywood to make sure that they've got good strength. No matter where they put anything, they're going to be secure in knowing that it's going to be a very, very strong connection. It's going to support the weight and the load that it was intended to support, and ultimately be safe. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to do our OSB strip wall. And again, OSB strips is going to be our most common way of straightening out the walls. It's our preferred method, again, because it's actually very inexpensive using the strips of OSB versus other material, and it actually goes pretty quick. And by where we space our strips out, we have an opportunity to really get everything nice, flat, and level. If we're using OSB strips, remember we want to have 18 to 20 inches on center spacing between our strips of OSB so that we can get 2 screws into each strip at the end of wherever a panel lands. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to start at 0, which in this case happens to be at the bottom. I'm going to set one at the bottom, I'm going to set one in the middle, and I'm going to set one at the top. I'm going to get those plumb first, and then I'll come back through and I'll backfill my 2 middle pieces and basically just use my level as a straight edge guide to show me where those panels or strips rather need to land. And we need to do that across every single stud. So this is going to take a minute. Use the magic of television. We'll time lapse through this real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what we did. One thing I want to remind you, when we're setting any substrate material, whether it's OSB, whether it's plywood, drywall, our strips, what have you, we want to have a 1/4 inch gap between the top of the flange and the bottom of the material that we're putting on the wall. That's going to allow for expansion and contraction, any flexibility that there might be in the floor, and causing bigger problems down the road. Your strip should be about 4 to 5 inches tall by the width of the wall minimum. If you make them larger, this will make the backing even more rigid and not as susceptible to bows, crowned or twisted studs, etc. It's best to do one wall at a time instead of putting them up and then trying to straighten them later, because there will be overlap in the corners. Now we have our strips attached to the back wall. As you can see, I use wood shims each stud. I went down top and bottom because these are wedge style shims, and if I only went one direction, the taper would cause these to sort of tilt a little bit. So I want these to be perfectly flat. So I went in top and bottom along each stud location, and I put 2 screws in each strip to make sure that they're secure, as well as to make sure they lay nice and flat. And then now I'll just go through and double check all of my studs and make sure that I'm plumb all the way into the corner, like so. That all checks out. So now we're ready to start hanging our Fibo. As you can see on this back wall, I've got a window and a niche. For this particular demonstration, I'm not going to do the window and the niche because we've actually covered that in our basic installation training video and the separate video I created that shows how to install Fibo around a window condition. So we're not going to do that. I am going to put some panels up so that we can install our ADA accessories later, but we're just going to cover that out. So I've got 5 strips, top to bottom, spaced, again, that 18 to 20 inches apart on center, which is what we want for proper screw spacing when we're screwing in our Fibo. So to go over what we covered, we're dealing with multiple substrate options with different wall outage conditions. We've got a cutout where we're doing a remodel retrofit, and we've got a backfill. We've got our OSB strips. We've got our blocking in place for our ADA grab bars, for a seat that we're going to put in, for a grab bar, for a hinge shower door. We've all done all of that, and everything is all set in place. So like I said, there's several ways to accomplish this. What I've found is that this is the best way that worked for me. If you've got a method that works for you, as long as everything is plumb and flat, then straighten out your walls, whatever works best for you. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to install the Fibo panels, and we'll install the ADA accessories and talk about that. Even though we cover that ever so slightly in our basic installation training video, I'll give you a quick demonstration on that. Again, when it comes to blocking for anything that's going to bear weight or the ADA accessories like I mentioned, always refer to the manufacturer of the device you're putting on the wall and consult your local building codes to make sure that you're in compliance and everything is perfectly safe. Back in a little bit. Remember, this is a guide for how to prep your walls for Fibo. There is more than one way to accomplish this, and what I've shown you here is basically my approach. Always be sure to consult your local building department, check uniform and local building codes, and what the specifications are of the respective manufacturer of any accessory that you're installing. If you're going to be using full sheet material, if your space is wider than a full sheet, like a 60-inch back wall, run the seam between the panels horizontally and not vertically. So rather than running a big long vertical seam, you want to run a horizontal seam, because that way, no matter where the end of a panel lands, you don't have to worry about it landing on that seam where there could possibly be a slight plane discrepancy. For blocking, 2x6 and 2x12 is best if an installation of the ADA accessories will take place at the same time as the Fibo installation. Make sure when you place these that you take note of where they are, so when you install the accessory, you put it where it's supposed to go. If the customer wants to have the option of adding ADA accessories in the future, then full sheet plywood as your substrate is best for that. A 1/2 inch thickness minimum, and again verify what your local building codes call for. Also be sure to pay attention to how wide the deck of your base or tub is. Fibo must sit flat on the deck, so with your wall outages, the thickness of the substrate, and all the other factors that go into play, that's all got to be considered when you're doing your wall prep. Finally, I want to mention that straightening the walls and removing any plane discrepancies, humps, bows, etc., it's not a practice specific to Fibo. This is typical for most wall panel and tile applications. All right, so the panels are done. Now it's time to add our ADA accessories. I'm going to start with my vertical grab bar over here. I put a mark on the wall so that I know where the bottom of my grab bar needs to be. Again, make sure you check with your ADA requirements, your building codes, etc., to make sure you place these in the right place. I already know where my material is. I've got solid stud backing, plenty of room, so I can set this grab bar right here close to the edge, and everything's going to be fine. It'll be inside my shower door if I decide to put one on, and I've got plenty of backing there. So I'm going to go sort of step by step with the way we recommend you install these, as far as how to drill the holes and use the Fibo seal, etc. And then I will go ahead and install the other two in a fast frame time lapse, and then we'll come back and talk about everything at the very end. Okay, so this is my location of where my bar needs to be, and I'm just going to use my torpedo level and make sure that it's straight. Hold it in place. I'm going to mark 3 holes per the manufacturer's instructions. And then I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill these holes. Now I'll go ahead and pre-drill the holes using the recommended drill bit size that the manufacturer required. I'm not going to drill my holes all the way through the panels. I'm going to only go about 3/16 of an inch, about halfway through the panel. Then we're going to apply Fibo seal into those screw holes, and then we'll let the threads of the screws that came with our grab bar carry the Fibo seal through the hole the rest of the way. Next step is to put Fibo seal in the screw holes, and then we'll go ahead and install the grab bar. This is nice and secure, not going anywhere. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run a bead of Fibo seal around the mounting plate where the escutcheon goes, and seal around the escutcheon, make sure that no water gets behind this thing. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll clean up all this excess Fibo seal using the Fibo Clean. I'm going to use the 90-degree angle tool on this, get this all cleaned up. Then I will install the other 2 pieces, and we'll come back and we'll do a final review of everything that we covered today. And that's that. So we have our ADA appliances installed, and we've covered pretty much most scenarios you're going to run into when it comes to wall prep, how to do the proper blocking, etc. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to seal the unit. We'll put the trim on. We did all of this drilling and whatnot before we applied the sealant because we don't want to get a bunch of sawdust and stuff in the sealant or whatever. So this stuff went on first. Now we'll finish the unit and get that all done. I'm not going to do that in this video because we've covered that in our basic installation training video, and all that information is there. When you're installing things like this, it's always helpful to have a second pair of hands. Sometimes we have to work alone and we got to do what we can do, but always helpful to have two people to do this. So anyway, so that concludes this video, this particular installment covering the wall prep, proper blocking, installation of ADA accessories. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this. As always, if you want to reach me, I will give you my email address and my phone number. Don't hesitate to reach out with any questions, suggestions, anything you'd like to see me cover maybe later in the future, and let me know how I can help support you. Thanks again for your support of Fibo, and we'll catch you on the next one.